Hi, and welcome to the Improvisers podcast. I'm Neil Thomas, and this is my co-host, Kevin James.
Thank you, Neil. On the Improvisers podcast, we chat to performers about their histories, their practices, their conceptualizations, understandings around their practices, and how they keep alive and flourishing in what they do. Who have we got today, Neil?
Today it gives us great pleasure to be in conversation with ERNIE GRUNER. ERNIE talks of his first mentor, his grandmother, and his long and enduring, inspiring relationship with playback theatre.
He also spoke of the wide range of musical genres that he's participated in over a lifetime, as well as his current project Bowlines, which is an exploration of improvisation for a string trio. Let's go.
Welcome, ERNIE GRUNER, to the Improvisers podcast. Let's jump straight into it, ERNIE. Your history of music improvisation, a brief synopsis of that vast experience that you've had.
My initial training was classical, and there is some elements of improvisation with that, but really what got me going more was starting to play in folk music, especially world music scenes, especially gypsy, Middle Eastern music and other related forms that were like that, where there's often sections that you have solos, so you're improvising. And of course there's jazz, playing solos in jazz is, that's the thing most people think of as improvising. But then the next level of improvisation for me was working with actors and dancers. And I actually started doing that in university a long time ago. Some dancers from Rusden asked me to play for them, and I thought, what am I supposed to do? And I did sort of make up something. But anyway, the main thing is my work with playback theatre has been a fantastic experience, working with improvising actors and dancers, and creating music either by myself or with another musician, or so to create moods, rhythms, and textures that support, encourage, or sometimes move along a story or whatever's going on.
So tell us a little bit more about playback theatre and just flesh that out a little bit for people who mightn't know about it.
So in playback theatre, it's a form which started, I think, 40 years ago, 40 in America, but it's spread around the world. There are companies all around that are doing it. The basic premise is that a company, which maybe is 4 actors and a musician, or 5 actors and 2 musicians, whatever, we listen to stories from the audience. So one of the actors designated as a conductor or the leader will elicit stories from the audience, initially short little snippets. We call them moments. And we hear a moment, we hear a short story, and then instantly the actors and the musicians will recreate that moment. Not necessarily literally. Sometimes we might be going for an analogy or a metaphor or something else. So we do a few of those moments, and eventually we go to stories, which I guess you could call long form things, which can go for quite a while and go through several stages of improvisation from the actors and the musicians, and we're working tightly together, listening to each other, watching each other, to create something which hopefully reflects what the storyteller has just said.
Benny, I'm just reflecting on the breadth of your background, which you haven't spoken about that much yet, and it is in the bio for readers to have a look at. But you've got such a wide and background of having worked in many genres of music and in many contexts. And also, I noticed that your most recent project is Bowlines, which is a a stringed improvisational context. So what I'm really interested in is improvisation as it's become of interest to you over time, what it means to you, and how you found your sort of capacities around improvisation, of being responsive to what is there, of working emergently, and what you've found you've needed to do to develop skills and capacities as an improviser.
So yes, I mean, originally I thought it was impossible. I remember going to, for instance, or here's an example. I remember going to Playback Theatre way before I was in it or thought about it, and I guess I was gobsmacked. How did the actors do that? Let alone how did the musician work out, and then how did they bring it together? So I actually remember thinking, when I grow up, I want to do that. Anyway, but yes, there are technical skills. So I am fortunate to have a very strong classical music background. That's given me technical chops to work with. But then somewhere along the line, you have to let go of some of those things and build on them. So, and that's partly listening to and playing a lot of different genres of music and being able to mix and match things, and then at the next level to create something, to try and create something new, if that's appropriate. I'm not sure if that answered your question, Kevin.
It's a good start, Ernie. We've mainly on the Improvisers podcast worked with dancers and with more theatrical performance backgrounds. We've interviewed a couple of people from sound backgrounds, and they in some ways have sort of worked more with sound making, less structured, and sound as a sort of a more pure, maybe pure is a reasonable word, pure form of giving form to the sort of emergent experience as they're experiencing it. So I'm wondering if you can comment a bit further about your approach, a little bit more detail.
I was going to start off by saying, when I'm listening, I'm thinking, but I don't know if I think anymore. I just do it. So, I guess there are all those elements, things called scales and arpeggios and notes and so on. But somewhere along the line, it's, what's the storyline? What's the conversation? What am I reacting to? If I'm working with other people, what might inspire them or push them on? I mean, a classic example with playback theatre is, for instance, if we've been listening to someone tell a story and the actors are replaying the story in some way, whether it's straight ahead or metaphorical or something else, and as a musician or as one of the musicians, we're playing with them, somewhere along the line, it needs to come to a close. So I guess I'm watching the actors like a hawk. If you've worked with people for a while, you get to know their facial cues, their bodily, I was going to say bodily functions, their bodily cues. And sometimes you think, no, they're going too long, and I or we are going to give a musical thing that says, no, we need to finish this. We need to come to a close.
It strikes me you've sort of developed a unique way of working music with theatre or with text or with conversation, that you're almost conversing with the actors in a certain kind of way with a vocabulary that you've constructed. So of course they're responsive to your music, so they're hearing that swell, they're hearing that the dip, or however the contrast that signals change.
That's right. So it could be to do with dynamics, soft or loud. It could be to do with a scale or a mode that I or we are playing. And if you go back to, I think it was Pythagoras, talking about how various scales or modes affect emotions. And, you know, people in the West, we talk about major scales are happy, minor scales are sad. That's one way of looking at it. But if you start looking at a lot of other cultures, there are different interpretations. So, for instance, in a Arabic scale, some of those scales, they interpret the opposite. So I'm always trying to think not just about the actors, but also the person who's telling the story and what their culture might be from, and how what I'm playing might affect them. And the other thing is rhythm, of course. I mean, I don't always, I was going to say just play the violin. I play other instruments, and percussion is critical. You know, percussion is really important. And, you know, speed, slow, but also rhythms. Again, in the West, we tend to play 2/4 or 3/4 or 4/4, but in many other cultures, rhythms in 7 or 9 or 11 or even more compound rhythms like that, they're not uncommon. So if it's appropriate, then I or we as musicians will bring that in.
I'm interested in how you perceive the difference between, say, classical music and the playing of a score, working with an orchestra, what that experience is like for you. And it feels to me that you're saying you've been attracted to the improvising for yourself, that there's something in that. Would it be true to say that you've grown away from the structured music playing? And I'm interested if you could reflect upon why that might be.
So, I mean, I still play string quartets occasionally, or duos and so on, trios for that matter. But the music is there, it's written down. Now, there is actually a lot of leeway that a performer can make to give nuance. You know, I saw a solo violinist playing the Bach sonatas the other day at a venue called Tempo Robato, and the Bach solo sonatas, they're technically, some of them are technically devilish, and she was able to create nuances and dynamics and even changes of speed at times to give them more emotion and feeling. And so Baroque and classical and romantic music, of course there's that possibility. I guess I became more interested in other options, what we call folk music or world music, and elements of improvisation with those which are much more common and almost expected to be part of what you do. I mean, an example is a Greek musician won't just play the tune; they'll play a taksim, which is like a solo, and there are sort of rules and regulations about how far you can improvise within that, but there's still that variety. So I find that very interesting and something I can learn from in different cultures, and have that option to use or not use those tools.
Ernie, maybe if we can head towards bowlines a little, because it seems like that is a current exploration, and it seems like you've set that up for a very particular reason. So I'm wondering if we could invite you to chat about that and chat about what you're finding out with as bowlines is progressing. That's one question. The other one I want to just touch briefly on, and maybe we'll come back to it a little later, is that many of the people we've interviewed on the Improvisers podcast are solo performers, and they speak of a very real relationship between themselves and the audience, which plays a very central role in the emergence of material as they perform. But I guess in the context that you're working, the audience, you're working more collaboratively with other performers and less solo. But I'm wondering, maybe we'll come back to a commentary around audience and responses and how that might shape the context of improvising. But can we start with bowlines and what you're exploring there, and then head in that next direction of audience relationship?
Yeah, so I formed bowlines partly because I love strings. I love the sound of strings. I'm a violin player. I'm biased. I play viola as well. But the point is that I love strings. I love improvising. Playback theatre in a way gave me that gift or the inspiration to realise what's possible. But if you look up dictionaries or websites or whatever, or I don't know, Google improvising string groups, when people think about improvising in music, they think of trumpets, horns, bass players, guitars, whatever, and strings don't pop up a lot. There's obvious exceptions. Stefan Grappelli, the famous jazz violinist, and there's other jazz violinists like him, who are of course well known, but in a way they're playing. They're not. I was going to say they're playing like horn players, but that's not totally true. But they're playing in an idiom where they're supported or playing with piano or guitar or bass or drums. What I was curious about was it possible to have just strings doing it? So not having a set chord, a chord playing instrument, for instance, or a set percussion instrument or a set bass instrument or whatever. Violins, violas, we do have those options, or cellos for that matter, to play chords. But I was curious to see what could come out of just 3 stringed instruments, working with musicians who have experience in multiple genres and obviously improvising as well. And again, being inspired by ideas that had come especially through playback and various world music groups that I've been part of.
It's a difficult thing to do, I think, group improvisation, and it's 3 instruments located in a similar tonal range, or I guess it creates a possibility of a mess, of an overlapping mess. So it's a testament to the skill and sensitivity of the players that you've gathered that it works.
It does. It is tricky in a way because we don't have chord players, but we all can play chords. Can play chords to a certain extent, not as much as a keyboard player or a guitar player, but we can play chords. But there's also elements where we can play against each other or with each other, I guess you could say, in terms of counterpoint or harmonies. And I guess it comes to a point of watching and listening and playing together enough and having enough trust to know when to start, when to stop, or when to change. And I think that's the challenge. That's one of the challenges, is how long do you go for? So one of my, I didn't say it before, but one of my big inspirations also is the Necks. And they can, amazing band. They can go for, I think, 30, 45 minutes more. I've seen them live. I've got their recordings, and so I don't think we can ever do something like that. But we get. I mean, I certainly get inspired by groups that do that sort of thing. And as I said, I'm just inspired by, or I'd like the idea that string players could do it. And I teach a little bit, but I used to teach more. And I got hired a few times by schools to try and talk about or inspire kids to improvise, because, you know, it's not taught. It's not even talked about in a lot of cases. And I find that odd. You know, centuries ago it was expected that a violin player, or a cellist for that matter, would be able to improvise. Mozart, Beethoven, etc. They all left passages blank, which was there were whole sections where it was expected that the soloist or someone would improvise, make up something based on what had come before and what was going to go afterwards. That's a solo thing, but yeah.
What you've written about bowlines, and you use the word inspiration, that there's a number of ways by which you might be inspired in the work you do together. And one was potentially responding to a painting, or responding to a piece of writing, to sound from the audience or the environment, to the architecture or the surrounds, and to feelings that might arise in each person. Could you wander through that a little bit further and talk about these factors that might shape or influence or be drawn upon as the piece is progressing, I guess we could say, or emerging?
So a couple of examples. So for instance, at a recent concert, and we've done it before, one of us might bring a book. So I brought Grimm's Fairy Tales, which was a childhood book I had from my mother. Apparently, I think that is about a bit out of vogue now. So one of us started reading at random a story, and the others, after hearing a bit of the text and the way he or she, I can't remember, it was me, it was weird, I can't remember who did it. After a while, one of us would keep reading, and the others eventually would start playing to try and garner or play under or establish the tone of the story. And then the story would stop and the music would continue. So that's one example. Another example is Bolan's is played at art galleries, where we might wander around. One of us will be particularly drawn to a painting or a sketch, and then we'll play the painting, I guess you'd say. And it might be the textures, it might be the colours, whatever it is, something's triggered. That's my heart, brain or heart, whatever it is, to compose, improvise something in the moment. During the pandemic, we did something which was walking along the Merry Creek. So I remember at one stage we just stopped in front of a tree and played to the tree. So,
or tying in with that thing about audiences and while you were talking, I was thinking about the role of music in culture or in society, and the different ways that music's used, and in music to dance to, music to entertain, music to kind of get ideas across with lyrics. Playback, there's a different role that music plays there. With bowlines, I'm wondering if you could talk about how you see that operating in culture or with audiences. How does that interact?
So we or I might feel that what we've been doing is being appreciated by the audience, but we might feel that it needs to be some sort of change of pace. So one of us might decide, okay, we're going to play happy, bright, chirpy music and dancey music. And whether or not people get up and dance or not is not relevant. Sometimes they do. But it's more about, trying to respond to what we think or how we feel other people are as well. So I guess it's not all about us. I mean, we have, I call it a set list, but it's just a bunch of ideas. And so with that bunch of ideas, we randomly point with our bows. One of us will say, okay, we're doing that. And it's, we go with it. And I guess that's an improvisation principle, is that if someone makes an offer, you accept it. And that's something really valuable I have from playback.
I'm thinking about how we attend to the details of what's happening as we're performing, and how we stay available to sort of emergent responsiveness, and how we stay alive to that as performers. You speak of the necks, and yes, I love the necks, and I suppose their capacity to sort of start somewhere and continue with the emergent material as it forms and forms and forms, and stay with that for a duration. What do you think, or what have you found about being available to sort of emergent material and staying with it and staying sort of interested and energized? And what have you found the capacities you've needed to develop to actually do that, to be available and to stay with?
So that is a good question, and that's something that in Bowlines we've worked on, is choosing or not choosing to stay with material. So I think one of the offers is hold on to one idea. That's it. That's just the provocation, because it's so tempting for one of us or two or three of us to, after a while, say, oh, I've got a great idea, let's just go off. And that can be really good. But yeah, so an idea might be just try and stay on one idea, or just two or three ideas, but that's it. So I think that's that idea of restricting yourself or restricting the group as a way of also inspiring or creating ideas, music. Yeah.
I think restriction is a really interesting notion to contemplate around when we think about creativity and particular improvisation. And I was thinking about the restrictions that are perhaps a classical format. Like it's sort of highly restricted in a certain way. You've explained how there is a freedom within that, the nuances. It's like, and I was sort of thinking that playback might have given you an opportunity to work within a particular framework, a particular set of restrictions, that you're really listening to what the actors are doing, and that was your response. You've learned to respond to that. It's a whole new vocabulary that you've developed over a long period of time and became a master at, and has influenced your musical playing outside of playback, and that this has bled through into Bowlines. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, totally. I wouldn't be talking to you if I hadn't ended up, I guess, yeah, being with playback, and I'm just incredibly grateful for that opportunity. When I started, I think I was two musicians someone had just left, and they recommended me. And at that stage, it was just me. And then I had other partners over the years, but and playback itself, the company's changed a lot. The ideas for how we work, provocations, the leadership, the methods, and so on. But the basic ideas have stayed the same and keep inspiring me. I mean, why would I be doing that for something for so long if I didn't love it? I love it because it inspires me. and yeah, people come up with new ideas. And look, and also, you know, when we're playing for public shows or corporate shows or for schools or community organisations, we have no idea what's going to happen, and so we hear these amazing stories. So we're gifted in insight into another world, and then trying to respond to those stories in a, you know, I guess a supportive way, but also in a way that might show back, feedback, playback to that person or those people what they've just said or, you know, talked about. So I think it's an amazing thing.
Ernie, when you put it like that, I'm just thinking that, you know, audience is sort of, there's multiples when it comes to playback theatre. I think the entwinement between actors, the storyteller themselves, the witnesses there, and the sound artists, the entwinement between, I guess you're all audiencing in some ways and witnessing each other. So there's a multiplicity rather than an audience and a performer. So it what a wonderful sort of entwinement, I guess, that is, and that capacity to sort of perform within the multiplicity of relational meetings.
That's right. It's not a black room. We can all see each other. We can, I guess, you know, see reactions, feel reactions. That affects us. What we're doing or saying probably affects other people as well. You know, the choice of instruments that we pick up or don't pick up might or might not affect people. Let alone the tone, the loudness, the softness, the scale or whatever. There's all those possible things that might have an effect on the audience, let alone us. Yeah.
I wonder if you'd be happy to talk about your direct musical mentors. We've talked about playback as an ongoing energy, but in your long history, the people that have stood out for you.
Well, I guess to start off with, I was very lucky to have my grandmother was Polish. She was Polish, but she was one of the first women to graduate from the Vienna Conservatorium. So she was serious classical musician, very serious classical musician. She taught she actually survived Japanese prisoner of war camps. It's a long story how, and ended up in Dunedin teaching at the university there in New Zealand. And I used to go over to her to visit as a grandson, but also for master classes. And she would listen to me playing. If she did not like how I was sounding, she would ring up my father and say, sack the teacher and get another one. And that happened 5, 6, I don't know how many times, but eventually I was lucky and I ended up learning from teachers who were at the Victorian College of the Arts or Melbourne University. While I was studying science. I did a science degree, not music, but I was studying music all that time and playing in string quartets and orchestras. So I was very lucky to have the grandmother. She was, I've got to say, hardline, hardcore, and she was she was quite upset once I started deviating. By deviating, it was when I started playing Scottish and Irish music, because we lived opposite the chief bagpipe teacher at Scotch College, and they invited us over to Hogmanay's and said, well, you can read this. This is a book of Scottish fiddle music. Can you play a few tunes? And then eventually I started being involved with the Irish scene because it's much bigger in Melbourne, and they were very, very encouraging, and also encouraging to learn music by ear, not from sheet music. So that helped with my oral training. Yeah. So that's but eventually that led to being invited to play in world music bands where there was definitely more improvising and different types of improvising. in different times, in different different times in different key signatures, and a lot more variety as well. So, like, I guess the analogy would be learning languages is the only thing I can think of. So yeah, it's just what drew my ear, or my, and I feel very fortunate to be in Melbourne, which has such a range of diversity of cultures and musical expressions. So, and so with some of the groups I play with, we might play for a wedding or a private function, and we might not necessarily be the only band playing, so we get to hear other types of music or musicians and get inspired by them as well.
Ernie, we take the word improvisation, we use it, so I guess we all take for granted we understand something about the word improvisation, and many people from many arts-based modalities use the word, but I'm wondering if you're willing to define it in your own terms. So we possibly all take something for granted, that we think we understand what it is, but what have you come to know about improvisation from your long, remarkable sort of immersive practice in this area? How would you define it if we were to use the word improvisation so in its common use or so readily?
So I think it's about knowing or having a basis, a theme, a sentence, whatever it is, and creating or building from it something that flows out of the original and builds on it, and something that's going to inspire myself, the player, maybe even inspire other people as well, and probably come back to the original form or not, depending on what sort of genre it is or what country you're playing from. I'm not sure if that answered the question, Kevin.
It's a good go at answering. I'm not sure if there's an answer to it, but I think what you've offered there is a great addition to, I think, the many takes that people have on.
I like the idea that there's not a wrong note. You can't play a wrong note, because it's going to lead to something which might be a right note eventually. I think that's a quote, but I can't remember who. Anyway.
Yeah, so Ernie, I guess that implies staying available to what is happening, staying responsive to what is happening, staying sort of somehow free enough around what is happening to enable things to appear that are not just habitual or of previous learning. So I guess that sort of availability and open-endedness is something inherent to the prospect of becoming.
I think that's the big thing is for musicians, keeping your ears open. I'm not sure what it is for a physical actor, I guess, keeping your body open to whatever's next. But it's being available and listening and being able to respond in the moment to something that's happening right now, or something that's just been, it's being inspired.
I think this might be a good time to move the podcast towards the end. On that note, a stab at what improvisation might be. Is there anything further you'd like to throw into the ether, the cyber ether, Ernie?
I think that I would just say anyone who's thinking about improvising to try it and not give up. If I had $1 for everyone who'd say, especially classical musicians, well, particularly classical musicians, friends in a lot of cases say, I don't know how you do that, or how do I do it? And the only thing I can say to them is to try it, give it a go, and to keep trying, and also that there are different ways of doing it. So I don't improvise as a standard jazz player who's come through VCA or somewhere. I mean, I can read chords to a certain extent and do that for function gigs, but my main thing is my ear. So my main thing is listening to the pianist or the guitarist or whoever and listening to where they're going. It really helps me if I already know the song or the tune. So listening a lot and listening to people that you like. And I don't do it as much now, but I used to just play along, just have the radio on and play along, not even trying to play the notes correctly, but just having fun, just having a go. I don't know if that equates to dancing around the living room. Yeah, so maybe that's my answer.
Maybe just a slight extension on that, Ernie. This sort of the long arc of your practice as an improviser. It goes back many, many years now. You're a very significant person in the domain that in which you are work. I'm wondering what development over time as an improviser means to you. You know, you're suggesting those that are starting to just persist and persist and persist. And is that what you do? You continue also to persist, or what is development and refinement? What does it become for you as an improviser?
I think it's being open to watching, listening to other people. I was thinking about Adam Simmons, who's a fantastic improviser. He actually did work with bowlines on one concert, but he ran a thing called the Festival of Slow Music in Ballarat, and he did invite bowlines, and we played for that. But what inspired me about that festival was there were people from other types of genres and instruments and so on, and almost the idea that almost anything goes. There was a guy who had I think he was a sculptor, and he was hammering something, and I think there must have been a saxophone player or someone. They were collaborating, so it was a joint piece with sculpture, and anyway, it was just that idea of different options. I think I've lost the question.
The question was really to do with that longer arc of development as an improviser, and what keeps you enthused, what keeps you committed, what keeps your practice alive now, I wonder.
Oh, I think it's coming up with new ideas or working with people I like and working with people, working with different people, different genres, different instruments. At the moment, of course, I'm saying this bowlines thing is a particular thing because I feel strings are underrepresented. Yeah, going out and seeing people, listening to different genres of improvisation, just any music, and just anything to keep the fires burning, keep the passion alive, and yeah, that's it. Loving it.
Well, Ernie, what a wonderful opportunity we've had today. I part of me would like to just keep going and going and keep mining you and the conversation for further detail, but it feels like we've covered lots of terrain. It feels like it's a very rich world that you inhabit and that you've given us access to. So, Ernie, thank you so much for today. I thank you for today, and I'd like to acknowledge your the substantial place I see you as holding in the world of music in the range of domains, and especially in playback theatre and now bowlines. And well done.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Neil. And I've loved watching your work over the years as well. So there you go.
Thanks, Ernie. Brilliant.
Great podcasts also.
Great.
Thank you.